Are there constructive things that you can do to help restore a culture of life? Find out next on this edition of Life Matters. Brian Johnston is the Western Director of the National Right to Life Committee. He has served in many capacities while advocating for innocent lives, as California Commissioner on Aging, as Chairman of the California Pro-Life Council, on the board of the National Legal Center for the Medically Dependent and Disabled. And now here's our host, Brian Johnston.
Welcome back to Life Matters. We're your program on life, on culture, on the very real battle of ideas. And if you don't realize there's a battle of ideas swirling around you right now, then you've already lost. Because this battle is for how you think, how you view your own life, how you view the lives of others. In the Right to Life, we talk about the fact that we take that phrase from our founding documents, from the statement that government is there to protect the lives of those that can't protect themselves. The right to life of vulnerable individuals is a right given by God. The government must enforce that right, must protect it. And that's what the current debate is about when it comes to the abortion issue. When it comes to the euthanasia issue, will government protect human beings that aren't capable at that moment of protecting themselves? Very important premise. It's really something you see re-echoing throughout Western civilization. And so what we do in this program, we do talk about what is Western civilization. If we are living in Western civilization, what is it? And if you haven't heard it, go back to our program, Podcast 38, where we talk about, well, what is Western Civ? Is it literature? Is it architecture? You always see those columns on the front of the Western Civ books. Is that what Western Civ is? Actually, no. Western Civ is even deeper than that. Western civilization has a foundational premise that human beings are not mere animals, that there's something about human beings that is spiritual in nature, that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. Those of you who were heard on a lot of Christian stations, those of you that remember what Paul said at Mars Hill when he was speaking to the Athenians, he said, your poets got very close. Your poets are reflecting a deeper issue, that there's something spiritual, we don't quite grasp it, but we want to. And he complimented them for that they were trying to understand the unknown God. Outside of Athens, and if you've studied classical times, they considered other tribes to be barbarians because they tended to live as animals. They lived in a tribal culture and didn't recognize the intrinsic nature of what it meant to be a human being. So it's not that we've attained, but there is that common thread that goes all the way back. It goes even before Christianity. What is shared in the Judaic tradition and in the Greek tradition is the idea that human beings are not mere animals. If you don't recognize that right now, that this battle that you're facing in your culture is over how we view human beings, that human beings, if we're just mere animals, then the dismissal of another human being is without significance. If we are more than animals, then our laws and our cultural values need to reflect that. So what we're going to do today, I'm actually visiting. We're outside of a coffee shop in Sacramento, California. And I'm with an old friend, Jim Wilson. Jim, I met through a series of events several years ago when he was working with the governor's prayer team here in California.
Indeed, it was a great privilege. Well, actually, and of course I knew of your work a long time before that, but we had mutual friends who brought us together, and you were good enough to take my place when I had to give up that mantle, and I can't thank you enough.
Well, glad to do it. I think it's critically important that Christians be involved in the government process and bring prayer to the fore.
Whenever somebody would ask me about, would find out that I was leading governor's prayer team in California, perhaps you've had the same question, they always want to know, oh, does Governor Brown know about this? And I would say, he's not the governor we're praying for or to. We pray for him, but we don't pray to him.
That's right. So being involved in government, being aware of the significance of government is critically important. Jim and I, we were talking earlier. By the way, you should know that Jim has been in ministry for 30 years. Much of that as an Anglican priest. And he still is an Anglican priest, and there's some great stories that he can tell in that tradition. But he's also been involved specifically as an author, trying to communicate some of the deeper things of life. One of the books he gave to me early on is Kingdom in Pursuit, and I greatly enjoyed that book, Jim. Why don't you mention just quickly what Kingdom in Pursuit is?
Well, Kingdom in Pursuit is, among other things, it's the only book I've published of the four that actually contains my testimony from start to finish, so that it will be of interest to some people. But Kingdom in Pursuit is actually a collection of essays that I've written over the last 10 years or so, what I consider to be the best of my blog posts, and it's divided up into 10 chapters by topic, top, you get a chapter introduction, but it's, for example, it's confronting the church. Because sometimes we need to confront the church itself as institution. It's confronting the culture. It's science versus scientism, which scientism is a religious. Science is great. Scientism is a religious faith that requires acolytes.
That's right.
So it's that kind of thing.
It's a great book. I really appreciate when Jim gave it to me. He pointed out that we've heard the phrase that the kingdom of God is at hand. But if you look at the Greek, if you look what is really being said, Matthew 4:17, that literally a better translation might be that the
kingdom is pursuing us. We don't have to find God. All we have to do is stop running away from him. He'll catch up.
That's right. And so looking for the truth, and when we come back in a little bit, Jim is going to tell us about his most recent book, his first novel, Generation. And we're going to talk about that. And the reason we're going to do it, as I said, our program is dedicated to the right to life, to the culture that reflects that value, and to the battle of ideas. And we have many times in this program, we've talked about cultural things like films and movies, the incredible power of this message. There are films that denigrate the right to life. You've probably seen them, whether you recognize it or not. Some of the films being produced by Hollywood intentionally denigrate the value of a human person, and they impact culture. There are other films, as you also know, and many of the films from classic Hollywood reinforce the value and significance of even the most significant life.
We're seeing a resurgence of films that affirm life and affirm the glory of God. Now, you're still getting a lot of stuff that I wouldn't want to write home about. But you're also, there's a new release just about every month of a film that doesn't just affirm God, but affirms who we are in Christ.
And I think it's important that our culture is having a cultural moment. These ideas are in contrast. Life Fest Film Festival, which we're proud to be part of and sponsor, affirms this underlying theme that human beings have significance. Every life has significance and value. And that's a premise, again, not just of Christianity, but of Western civilization. If we lose that premise, if that's gone from our culture, how can the righteous stand, as it says in Psalms? If we lose these foundations, how can we possibly pass laws to protect the vulnerable if we don't believe that human beings have value?
The good news is, and you and I have to do our part, and you know that as well as I do, and I think your listeners do, but the good news is that God has more invested in this than we do.
That's right. That's right. So when we come back, we're going to talk further with Jim Wilson. He's the author of Generation, and it's just being released. Jim's going to tell us a little bit about his book tour in Northern California and where you can get the book, where you can meet him and come and have him sign a book for you. Who's the publishing house?
Austin Macaulay. It's a British publishing house. Austin Macaulay is the publisher of Generation.
And the really neat thing is that this is a British publisher, and it's already received. It was submitted for the James Tate Black Prize.
For that prize, yes.
And it's a prize that's given only in the UK, and this novel's been submitted.
Quite an honor to be nominated.
It really is. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the importance of culture, but specifically a particular novel, and why telling these stories, this type of storytelling that reflects the inherent nature of what it is to be the human being. What does it mean to be a human being? What is life all about? That's an important question that human beings have asked, if they've taken the time, for centuries. And that is the question of our moment. We'll be right back after this.
Life Matters continues after this.
Hi, I'm Kevin Sorbo, and I was very excited when I heard about Life Fest Film Festival. Life Fest is the film festival dedicated to showcasing films that affirm the intrinsic worth of innocent human life and the profound significance of each life. One seemingly insignificant person can in fact change the whole world in which he or she lives. That one singular life ends up being of vital importance. I'm so glad to hear that you are cherishing that in this film festival and are committed to artfully and creatively protect the lives of those who can't possibly promote themselves.
Life Film Fest is dedicated to bring the message of life to Hollywood and to our culture. Go to lifefilmfest.com and get your tickets now. That's lifefilmfest.com.
Find out about the exciting cultural change impacting Hollywood. Go to lifefilmfest.com. And now back to more Life Matters with Brian Johnston.
Welcome back to Life Matters. We're visiting with a good friend, Jim Wilson. Jim has been in ministry for many years. He's been an advocate for life, and he's an advocate in the culture. There was another book, Jim, before this one, and I thought was an appropriate title, It has to do with living as ambassadors.
Yes, and that book, actually the whole title, I should tell you, is Living as Ambassadors of Relationships. It's about being a reconciler. 2 Corinthians 5:16 through 20, the meat of that is, you've been reconciled to God in Christ, now go out and be my ambassadors of that reconciliation. And it's across the board. It's political, cultural, generational, denominational, you name it. But the understanding is that reconciliation is not about you and I compromising our values. It's about you and I submitting our values to the source of all value, and that's, of course, the Lord.
That's excellent. That's excellent. And it's so much what we're called to do, to be involved in the culture, to be involved with other people, to bring the message that affirms life. And if you're a Christian, again, we're heard on Christian stations, but we're also heard on conservative talk stations. And I know that a lot of folks on conservative talk, they're looking for facts. What are the real facts? So we know if you're listening on Christian talk, you realize that there's a battle of ideas. And you don't have to be a Christian, by the way. If you're listening on conservative talk, you already know this, that the battle of ideas, the real struggle right now is the nature of government, the role of government in human beings' lives, and a deeper issue, what does it mean to be a human being?
Let me say something to those people. I mean, this book is not a quote-unquote Christian book.
Right.
The Lord is in the middle of it. The characters wrestle with faith. Some go one way, some go another. But what they're looking for is something real. Anybody who is listening to this broadcast or might run across Generation or any of my other books for that matter, if you're looking for something real, this is going to help you along the way. I'm a Christian. You're a Christian, Brian. An awful lot of people are, and you may be led that way. But it's not about, do you accept my idea of what's really real? It's, do you hunger for whatever is really real? I happen to think you're going to end up with the Lord, but that's just my opinion.
That's right. But you have to hunger first. You have to want it. And right now we live in a cultural moment with there's so much conflict. There are so many battling ideas that if you aren't trying to sort it out, you will be in trouble. If you just go along with, a corpse will go with the flow. So if you want to...
A chicken can run around with his head cut off.
That's right, and there's a lot of that going on if you've been watching Washington, D.C. So, well, Jim, tell us a little bit then about Generation. Tell us just some of the background and why you wrote this book and some of the undergirding themes.
Well, it's said in 1965. It's intended to be the first of a series of 6 novels that are going to be set about 5 years apart and telling the story of the Boomer generation, which is our generation. Okay. But in 1965, you got a cultural cauldron that's defined by the Vietnam War, which is heating up, Civil Rights Revolution is in full cry, and Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, which was intended to help families and actually split them apart terribly. You've got 4 young men who live in Southern California. It's where I grew up. You write about what you know. They're surfers. And they are very cynical about what they learn in school and what their parents have told them, unfortunately for good reason. So all they're looking for in the beginning is, can I cut school and go surfing and not get caught and not get in trouble over it? Sure. And after a couple of chapters into the book, after several disasters, I mean, on the first page, you got 2 deaths and a broken arm. Disaster happens. And we can either be angry about it, go along with it, or say there must be something else. Well, a couple of chapters into the book, they're saying there's got to be something more, because they come to realize they're just as corrupt as the people they don't like, as the people they don't trust, but they don't know what to do about it. The rest of the book is their journey looking for the really real. And as I said a moment ago, I happen to believe that journey has a particular terminus, and that's the Lord. But we're not trying to pump that into people. They're either going to come to that, or they're going to come to whatever they want to come to.
Yeah. And I think just you saying that, I know when I was in high school, a good friend had actually committed suicide. And I found it stayed with me, and I found that loss, that unnecessary loss, to be so tragic. And I believe that has opened my eyes to the tragedy of suicide, and now this idea of assisted suicide, which really is it's voluntary euthanasia, but it's not always voluntary.
Well, and that's the dirty little secret.
Yes.
The young lady who was the poster child for assisted suicide in California, Brittany, I think.
Yes.
She had glioblastoma, which was at that time a death sentence. 6 weeks after her death by suicide. They claimed it was suicide. We don't really know how she died. But 6 weeks later, they came up with a cure for the disease.
Yeah, they'd been working on a cure, but she had not been told about that. So really what suicide is hopelessness. It's the ultimate act of hopelessness. But that's not a physical quality. Hope is not a physical quality. We are essentially spiritual beings having a physical experience.
One of the characters, one of the, not primary, but one of the main characters in Generation is a young lady named Katie. Katie has grown up, God help us, in a fundamentalist Christian home where she's beaten and abused. Well, there's plenty of ugly stuff in the church.
Sure.
And she's beaten and abused, and she is completely cynical and she makes the cynicism of these boys look like they're Boy Scouts because of what she's been through. She discovers what is really, well, she does become a Christian. She's one of the characters who does. But the point is that she has no reason to live until she's given a reason to live. And the book is about looking for that, seeking that.
Yes. Well, Jim, just real quickly, you're now in Northern California for this tour. You're living in Idaho. But tell me, let's see, you're going to be in Chico next week on the 16th?
Actually, I'm going to be in Chico on the 13th. I'll be signing books from 3 to 5 p.m. at the Wildcat Bookstore on the campus of Chico State University. Nice. The following day, I will be I'll generally be in this area. I'm going to be doing a book signing at the Serendipity Bible House Christian bookstore in Fairfield, and then Bounty Books, which is a secular store, in Vacaville. And then on the 15th, which is a Saturday, I'll be at the Barnes & Noble in Natomas in the Sacramento area. And Sunday the 16th, I will be at the Barnes & Noble in Fresno, California. That will complete this particular trip. And that's, it's 6 p.m. in Fresno, 1 to 3 in Natomas, 3 to 5 p.m. at Bounty Bookstore, and 11 to 2 at the Serendipity store, 1 to 3 at the Wildcat store.
Well, that's great. We're going to come back just a bit. We're talking to Jim Wilson. He's author, lecturer, blogger. He is a Christian extraordinaire. Troublemaker. Yeah, that's right. And if folks can't get to the bookstore, where could they possibly get the book or
First of
your
all,
other books?
They can get the book at any Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble stocks them. And if for some reason they don't have any, you can special order it. You can get it directly from Austin Macaulay, which is my publisher. You can get it from Amazon. You can get it from me directly if you need to. My email address is praynorthstate@gmail.com. And of course, you can get it at these bookstores, that are not chains, any Barnes & Noble. But you can also get it at the Wildcat in Chico. You can get it at Serendipity Bible House in Fairfield and Bounty Books in Vacaville.
Well, we're going to be right back right after this.
You're listening to Life Matters.
Life Film Fest is the creative outreach in Hollywood that's changing Hollywood and the culture. There's many films you've already seen that actually had their start at Life Fest in Hollywood, their premiere. But more than that, we work with people throughout the industry who want to creatively bring the message of life. Not just hit you over the head with it or preach to you about it, but creatively impact the culture so that hearts and minds of our fellow citizens understand the depth and the breadth and the warp and the woof of what the right to life really is. Be part of Life Fest Film Festival and make a difference.
Every life does matter. Every life is significant. Find out about the exciting cultural change impacting Hollywood. Go to lifefilmfest.com. And now back to more Life Matters with Brian Johnston.
Welcome back to Life Matters, your program on life, on culture, the very real battle of ideas. If you hadn't heard us earlier, we're actually doing a remote recording here in Sacramento. We're not in studio. We're visiting with a good friend, Jim Wilson. He's an author, and he's recently come out with his first novel, Generation. And that's available at any Barnes & Noble, and he's doing some book signings throughout the North State of California, and we'll make those known again at the end of the program. You said, Jim, that there really is a thread deep in, and that's what I like about novels. That's what I like about storytelling. And Jesus was the best storyteller.
Well, he was also the best story.
There you go. That's exact. There's a deeper issue. A lot of people just saw a poor carpenter from Nazareth. What good thing can come from Nazareth? Mm-hmm. But there was a deeper issue that unless...
I've been to Nazareth, by the way. It's a legitimate question, but it is answerable.
That's right. And so we're here in Northern California. What good things can we talk about, or what came out of Southern California and that culture of the 60s? But you had mentioned that the culture of life is there. It's there as a thread, and it can be followed. And why don't you tell us about that?
If I can, let me just give you a quick detail that I think will give us a little context.
Okay.
One of the things in a couple of the reviews of the book that has been said that I have to admit I did not recognize or anticipate as I was writing the book. And that is people say, well, surfing is used as a metaphor for this quest for real life. Well, now that people say it, I say, oh, you're right, it is, but did I intend it? No. Stories tell themselves.
Yes.
They have a life of their own. And these guys, you have to remember that generation is set 8 years before, for example, Roe v. Wade.
Mm-hmm.
Abortion was not an issue, a cultural issue in 1965. It was for a few people, but it wasn't a big deal. And yet, these guys are looking for what I would say the difference between excellence and perfection. Perfection is, I've got a goal. I'm willing to sacrifice to get there. I want to be the head of a corporation. I want to hit 300 or 400 in baseball, what have you. It's a single-minded goal.
Right.
Excellence is a search for life, for real life. And it's perfection says, how do I get where I want to go?
Yes.
Excellence says, how do I become the person I'm called to become?
Well, that's a great contrast. I didn't mean it, but in terms of Amazon has become one of the principal marketplaces for getting things.
Indeed it has.
Getting things.
I shop there.
Right, and so do I. And so one of the things that you were pointing out is that life does not consist in the abundance of things.
Exactly.
That excellence is different than perfection is having all of these things just right. But that doesn't satisfy.
A little more than halfway through the book, these guys go on a road trip to Alabama. Now, this is right in the middle of the voting rights marches. Mm-hmm. And you have to remember, and you're a history buff, you do remember this, nobody in mainstream America cared much about the voting rights movement until the photographs, the video of blacks being beaten.
Yes, and the dogs.
And the dogs and the fire hoses
and
interrupted the movie of the week.
Right.
And then all of a sudden America rose up and said, President Johnson, you need to do something about this.
Right.
So in the book, the guys go off to Alabama because they don't believe anything anybody's telling. They're very mistrustful of authority.
Right.
But they have the courage and the integrity to say, I'm not going to just make assumptions. I'm going to go see for myself. Well, they meet people at the Little Brown Church, which is where the voting rights marches began, who are, and by the way, they're not all black, by the way. They're about a third of the civil rights marchers were white.
Right.
And I'm not saying this to in any way denigrate the black contribution.
No, of course not.
I'm simply saying it was an upheaval of the culture.
That's right.
That needed to happen.
Human values. There's a deeper issue here. Even Martin Luther King said he longed for the time that the judgment would not be based on his color, the color of his skin,
but the content of his character.
And I like how you brought in excellence. And that distinction is very, very important.
Thank you.
Because you're right. Perfection makes it about the appearance of things, about things themselves. But excellence speaks deeper. There's a deeper issue.
Well, and
explore
more
that.
Holistically. When they meet these marchers at the church and they chat with some of them, and first of all, it turns out that there's the same generation gap in the black community. Well, a lot of people assume that there wasn't. There's a solidarity.
Right.
But the fact is, people are people and problems are problems.
That's right.
But what they hear from the marchers themselves is, first of all, we love our kids. With the reason we fear for some of the things they're doing is because we love our kids. But we also recognize that there is a higher value than just, am I able to get by? Am I able to get what I want? And that's, by the way, the reason for the commitment to nonviolence in the early years of the civil rights movement. It got lost later on, and most of the progress that was made was when the emphasis was on nonviolence.
Right.
Not because it's nonviolence, that's a tactic, but because people recognize it's about life.
Yes.
And not about what I can do by shoving people around and hurting people.
Right.
And they say to them, you know what, the marchers say to these guys who don't know the Lord, they say, unless you have a higher loyalty than just what you think is right or what you think needs to be done, you're going to be buried.
Yeah.
And when they leave, they have to run for their lives. They're almost get killed by the Klan as they're getting ready to go back to California. When they get back to California, they land right in the middle of the Watts riots that happened that same summer.
Yeah,
and they almost
remember.
lose their lives at the hands of a black mob.
Yeah.
But what they take away from the trip is what these people from the church said when they were visiting them, and it was a little bit quiet.
Yes.
That's what it is. It's that commitment to excellence. And of course, the book, there's a lot more stuff has to happen in the book before it comes to a conclusion. But they never lose that. What am I called to become?
I think this is an important issue because excellence refers to who I am and who I can be.
Amen.
And how can that there is someone who designed us.
Well,
we don't even know who we are.
And that's why some of the guys now have to say, because it's real life, not everybody figures that out, what you just figured out.
Right.
But those that do, more and more it begins to grow on them that being accountable to somebody I might call God is actually a privilege.
Right.
Because he's the one who made me, and he's the one who loves me more than anybody else.
Yeah.
And one of the young men named Lonnie picks that up while they're in Alabama. And on the way home, now he doesn't know what to do because he's not a churchgoer.
Right.
But they pull over for a rest stop, and he says, I just need to take a little walk. And he goes off from the side, away from the road a few yards, and he just says, Jesus, I don't even know who you are, but I know you know who I am. And I'm asking you to come into my life. That's all. He doesn't do the sinner's prayer.
Right.
He doesn't have a doctrine. He just
right.
says, I need you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's all the Lord has ever asked of us. That's why he pursues us.
That reminds me so much of Hagar going into the desert and realizing that there's someone who sees all things and that you see me.
And we think of Hagar as one of the villains of the Bible because of the way she treated Sarah. But Hagar was in need just as much, and God loved her every bit as much.
That's right. And it's just acknowledging that we have that need. And that is acknowledgement that we are deeper than things. We're not just a thing. There are two spiritual beings having a conversation. The fact that we have unique bodies is great, but we're more than these bodies. That is the message of Western Civ. And so, yes, ultimately, Christianity embraced that premise because they were seeing through a glass darkly. But if we lose the foundation of Western civilization, that human beings are not mere animals, if we lose that foundation, then we will lose Western civilization itself.
We will lose life itself.
That's right. So there's a great battle going on. This is a great novel. Very quickly, we're going to wrap up quickly. Where can they see this week, starting on the 13th? Where can they meet you, Jim?
On the 13th, from 1 to 3 p.m., the Wildcat Bookstore in Chico. It's on the campus bookstore, Chico State. On the 14th, the Friday, from 11 to 2, I'll be at Serendipity Bible House in Fairfield, here in California. From 3 to 5, I'll be at the Bounty Books at Vacaville. On the 15th, that's a Saturday, 1 to 3, Barnes & Noble in Natomas, here in Sacramento. And the 16th, Sunday, 6 p.m., Barnes & Noble in Fresno. And if you can't get to any of those, email me at praynorthstate@gmail.com, and we'll work something out. But you can, of course, you can get the book at if you don't really want to meet me, which there are people who don't. Hard to believe. But
you can get the book.
Get the book at Barnes & Noble or Amazon.com.
Thanks for listening to Life Matters. We'll talk to you next week.
To follow Life Matters on all social media and to subscribe to the Life Matters podcast, go to lifematters.life, where you will find everything you need to know to share life, culture, and the battle of ideas with everyone you care about. Life Matters is a production of the California Pro-Life Council, the state affiliate of National Right to Life. Wherever you are in the nation, you can find out more at National Right to Life. You can find vital pro-life information and also find the access to your state and local Right to Life affiliate. Get informed and get involved.